What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. Dan Hooker, 20-9 and ranked number 6 contender at lightweight versus Michael Chandler, 21-5, who's currently unranked in the UFC and is making his UFC debut. This is taking place at UFC 257 as a co-main event to Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor on January 23rd. Now, Dan Hooker versus Michael Chandler is kind of floating under the radar, isn't it? And I get it. It's on the same night as a Conor McGregor fight. So yeah, anything that you add to the fight card on a Conor night kind of feels like icing on the cake. I mean, hell, last year's Conor versus Cowboy Cerrone pay-per-view card was sort of treated like Conor was so big a deal that they presented the event with nearly no noteworthy fights on the undercard, almost like boxing style. That's how much attention Conor McGregor still swallows up in the MMA universe. But Dan Hooker versus Michael Chandler is very interesting and complicated because from Hooker's perspective, he's been putting in the work at the greatest MMA organization in the world with the most talent. So he could be like, I knocked out Gilbert Burns, who's about to fight for the title up at 170. I fought tooth and nail evenly with Dustin Poirier, who just challenged for the title. I won every round versus Al Iaquinta, who also challenged for the title a little before that. Who the f are you? And Michael Chandler's over here like, I'm a 3-time Bellator lightweight champion. I stopped Eddie Alvarez for my first title and was Sherdog's Breakthrough Fighter of the Year in 2011. I was so red hot that I was invited to the MTV Movie Awards back in 2012 when it kind of meant something. And when you were still 3-3 in your MMA career. So who the f are you? Yeah, I really think that both guys are coming into this one with a chip on their shoulder and something to prove, even though they're at very different stages in their career. I mean, since Michael Chandler left Bellator, we've been wondering for a while now who his first opponent was going to be. His first opponent in the UFC. I mean, I thought that maybe Paul Felder would have been a good UFC trial by fire. Then Chandler became the standby fighter in case either Khabib or Justin Gaethje went down before their championship fight. So he goes from possibly getting the golden ticket straight to the title shot to drawing Dan Hooker. Ouch. This is a rough test for Michael Chandler. But it's also a chance for Hooker to earn probably his biggest stripe, depending on whether you weigh a win over Chandler versus a win over Al Iaquinta higher. Now, Chandler's currently 34 years old and is coming off a stunning knockout win over the 37-year-old Benson Henderson, former UFC champ, with the first-round knockout. Chandler had fought the much lesser-known Sidney Outlaw just before that, knocking him out in the first, and he suffered his latest loss just before that versus Bellator pound-for-pound elite Patricio Pitbull Freire. Pardon the pronunciation, but this loss was via knockout and also came in the first round. So in the past 2 years, Michael Chandler has fought a total of 6 minutes. Now his fight just before that was the epic 5-round war versus Brent Primus in their rematch. Chandler won that rematch via grueling 5-round decision, whereas Primus had knocked Chandler out about a year prior to that. Now that knockout loss to Primus in 2017 and then the one to Pitbull in 2019, May 2019, those are the only 2 Michael Chandler losses of the past 6 years. He lost 3 in a row before that, one of which was a split decision loss to Eddie Alvarez in their rematch. Remember, Alvarez is who Chandler had submitted to capture his first Bellator championship. So you can tell, not only from the 21-5 record, but from his track record in opponent quality, that Michael Chandler is the real deal and knows how to win and can win big. But one thing that I'm looking at here is Michael Chandler's being in his mid-30s and fighting someone younger and taller in Dan Hooker. Michael Chandler is 5'8" to Hooker's 6 feet. And the guys Chandler's been fighting over the past several years have been anywhere between 5'5" and 5'10". Now Chandler is excellent at using his legs to close the distance. Dude is he's like a rail gun with his in and out movement, with powerful punches that he shoots like missiles as he jumps out and then back into the pocket. The dude is a force and is pretty athletic, However, that type of in and out activity can cut two ways. We saw one of the greatest boxers to ever display that type of ability to collapse the pocket with powerful and fast punches, and that's Manny Pacquiao, and we've seen him feast for 20-something years with that style, and even he got caught in his fourth fight versus the brilliant counterpuncher Juan Manuel Marquez. And trust me, Pacquiao moves his head a lot more than Chandler does. So if Chandler can't put Hooker out in the first round, and I mean like really damage him, if not stop him, keep in mind, this is a 3-rounder, not a 5. But if Chandler starts to get a little winded and starts dropping his hands, as he often does, but still wants to jump in and out and collapse the pocket, Dan Hooker has shown us the ability to catch the shorter guy trying to jump in. Not only in his outclassing of Al Iaquinta via decision 3 fights ago, but in his first round knockout of Gilbert Burns, as I mentioned, the current #1 contender up at welterweight 170. Gilbert Burns started dropping his hands and trying to enter the danger zone with defensive vulnerabilities that a city kickboxing student like Dan Hooker trains to identify. His training club includes super trainer Eugene Berriman and UFC greats like champions Alexander Volkanovski and, of course, Israel Adesanya. They've got it going on with that sophisticated striking game. They were like the 2019 Gym of the Year. Now, Michael Chandler possesses the tools to put you out as well, and is probably still at least near his prime athletically, even at 34. But I just think that there will come points in this fight where both guys start to tire, their legs fatigue a little, and Chandler gets caught with his hands low. But Hooker isn't exactly the cleanest of hit and not get hit fighters himself, is he? He's not the model of sweet science perfection that, say, Adesanya seems to be. He's not even as elusive as Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Not that many people are, but we just saw Hooker go to war with Dustin Poirier. And just before that, he had a 5-round blood and guts battle with Paul Felder, went the distance. And that one could have gone either way. Close, disputed decision win for Hooker. I actually saw that fight as a regression on how I viewed Hooker, even though he just beat Paul Felder. That's because I would think that an elite striker should have been able to demonstrate more of an outclassing of what I consider to be a B+ level fighter at the elite level in Felder. So it's not like Dan Hooker's been swimming without getting wet, as rapper Mac 10 and the late great boxing trainer brother Nassim Richardson would say. Hooker's been taking his lumps in recent fights especially. So a Michael Chandler knockout of Dan Hooker is certainly on the table, and I already said that I could picture Dan Hooker catching Chandler and possibly stopping him. Now, who would be more likely to win a decision between these two? Here is where it gets trickier, because I can see Dan Hooker out kickboxing Chandler and winning, say, 2 rounds to 1. And I can see Michael Chandler taking Hooker down and slowing the fight down, basically making it more of a boring fight to some fans who prefer the stand up and bang type of action. But Michael Chandler reaching into his wrestling bag might really serve him well here. I've long believed that most good and even great wrestlers prefer the stand-up as they enter MMA and get into their 30s and mid-30s. Rampage Jackson, John Jones, Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero, Rashad Evans, Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje. Wrestling is just so damn exhausting on the muscles, just draining. And this becomes much more difficult as you age. So if this was a 5-rounder, I would think Chandler might gas if he tried to wrestle for long periods of time over the course of several rounds. Kind of like Curtis Blades did when he tried wrestling Volkov for nearly 5 rounds. He started wrestling early and tried to have that be the continued strategy. I mean, Blades almost lost that fight because he was so gassed and vulnerable by the end of that one. But this is a 3-rounder, and I think that Chandler, if he doesn't get caught and stop trying to pursue Hooker, will eventually try to take Hooker down and can win at least 1 round if he commits to wrestling. All in all, I was thinking that the more likely outcome is Hooker catching Chandler with something clever, putting him down and eventually stopping him. But I think I'm going to actually go with Michael Chandler via decision, with his NCAA Division I wrestling background playing a significant role here. Again, I think that this being a 3-rounder favors Michael Chandler. And one more note, I would also target Dan Hooker's body with the strikes, or with some of the strikes if I'm Chandler. I know he likes to knock people out, viciously up top, but if he commits to Hooker's body, especially if Hooker thinks he's going up top and then he switches to the body, kind of like Ryan Garcia just did against Luke Campbell a couple weekends ago, you could find a vulnerability there. Dan Hooker was stopped to the body versus Edson Barboza a few years ago. But let me know your thoughts on this pretty under-the-radar co-main event. And also let me know your thoughts on the main event, this whole, 257 card, or at least the top 2 fights. And where do you think Michael Chandler and Dan Hooker would go with a win or a loss? Please leave your comments in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.